Hello and welcome to This Really Happened, a place where unbelievable, heart-touching true stories come to life. Sometimes surprising, sometimes bittersweet, always real. Grab a drink and settle in. We're about to begin. The frosty air nipped at his face. The snow crunched distinctly and loudly underfoot. Above his head, the bottomless sky stretched out, sprinkled with large, brightly shining stars. Arthur hurried home. His cheeks were burning, his nose was stinging, and even through his thick padded jacket, the cold penetrated to his very body. Only his feet, clad in massive felt boots, felt a pleasant warmth. He was returning from Peter's, a friend with whom he had been inseparable since childhood. Life had sometimes tossed them from side to side, but Peter was invariably there in the most difficult moments, supporting, helping however he could. Most often in silence, because eloquence had never been his strong suit. And words, to be honest, weren't always needed. Peter was one of those invisible threads that held Arthur in his native Oakwood. Although his children, long grown up and firmly settled in the city, constantly urged him to join them. "Come on, Dad. Think how much easier it will be for you there," his daughter Eleanor persuaded. "All the conveniences are at hand, no hassle with the garden or vegetable patch. Your pension is good, it'll be enough for rent and entertainment. You can go to the cinema, the theatre." "Where would I go from my own house?" Arthur stubbornly resisted. "What house?" his son William echoed. "What's good about it? It's old, leaning. The roof is always leaking, or the fence is falling down, or something else. It's constant work, but in an apartment it's beautiful. You'll live like a lord." "A stone cage," Arthur maintained. "And what would I do there? You're all busy all the time, and I'll just sit alone like an owl all day." "We'd visit more often," Eleanor offered her argument. "As it is, you live 150 kilometers away. It's not easy to travel to you." Arthur just sighed heavily and shook his head negatively. No, he wouldn't leave Oakwood. It was hard for his children to understand. They were so modern, so practical. There was, of course, sense in their words, but how could he leave the house that had become a part of himself? He remembered how his grandfather and father built it together with friends, the whole village helping, because his grandfather's previous home had burned to the ground after being struck by lightning. The new house turned out splendidly, strong, solid, smelling of fresh wood and resin. Many years later, when young Arthur, having finished his military service, decided to get married, his grandfather handed the house over to his only grandson. He himself moved in with his son. Arthur could still hear his grandfather's words. "A man must bring his wife into his own home. A wife should feel as secure behind her husband as behind a stone wall. Only then will there be happiness." And Arthur tried with all his might, so that Helen by his side felt protected and didn't think about life's difficulties, but simply enjoyed their life together. Helen, he met her when they were children, a thin, tanned girl with serious blue eyes, 2 thin braids, wearing a light pink dress and old dusty sandals, and always with a thick book tucked under her arm. That's how she first appeared before him, his future wife. Then, of course, he couldn't even imagine that it was fate. Arthur himself was about 10 or 11 years old. He was heading to the pond with Peter and other village boys. A fishing rod on his shoulder, a light bucket in his hand, trousers rolled up to his knees, a stretched-out t-shirt. Ahead was a whole summer, holidays had just begun, friends were nearby. Arthur's mood was light, uplifted, somehow carefree and happy. And then she was there, standing by the fence near old Betty's house and thoughtfully watching a cat with kittens, a newcomer. Arthur had never seen this girl in Oakwood before, and something about her captivated him immediately. Something made him stop to get a better look at her fragile figure. The other boys walked past, not noticing the stranger. But Arthur, he already felt then that this girl was not just a random passerby on his path. "What's wrong with you?" Peter turned around. "Why are you frozen? Let's go." At that moment, the girl raised her huge blue eyes and looked at Arthur. It was as if he'd been struck by lightning from head to toe. The boy, surprised at himself, blushed like a poppy. "Coming, coming!" he shouted to Peter and rushed to catch up with his friends. Later he learned that her name was Helen, and that she would now live with old Betty because something terrible had happened to her parents. They were gone. Rumours circulated. Some said the parents had run away, abandoning their daughter. Others spoke of a terrible tragedy. Still others told stories of them getting lost in the forest. Later it turned out that Helen's mother and father had died in a car accident. They were travelling to the city by hitchhiking. The driver lost control on a slippery road, and Helen was sent to the neighbouring village, to her only relative, old Betty. Learning of her fate, Arthur felt deep pity for the girl. He couldn't even imagine then how terrifying it must be to lose both mother and father in an instant. After that story, he wanted to protect her, to protect and to bring her joy. But the boy didn't know how to approach her. Seeing her from afar, he was happy about the meeting and felt very shy. And in general, Arthur had never been good at talking to girls. They seemed harmful and arrogant to him. But Helen was different. He felt it. Helen spoke to him herself. This happened towards the end of summer. Arthur had climbed a tree to rescue a silly kitten named Fluffy. The little neighbour's kitten was always getting into trouble, and this time, frightened by dogs, he had climbed a tall oak and couldn't get down. He sat at the top, meowing desperately for the whole street to hear. How could he just walk by? Arthur, of course, climbed up to rescue the hapless Fluffy. He scratched his chest and stomach on the rough bark, but at least he saved the animal. "You're really good at climbing trees," he heard a quiet voice behind him. He turned around and met the approving gaze of huge blue eyes. It was her, Helen. "It's nothing special." The boy was overcome with shyness again. "How cute." Helen's attention shifted to Fluffy. "Can I hold him?" "Of course." Arthur handed her the kitten. She began to gently stroke the grey fur, calling him various affectionate names. And somehow, without noticing, they started talking. Arthur no longer remembered what about. He thought they first talked about cats, then about dogs. Helen told him about her life with her parents there in the distant large village. She missed her mother, her father, her old friends, her school. There was so much longing in her voice and eyes. Arthur immediately promised to introduce Helen to the Oakwood boys and girls. He assured her that there were good, cheerful kids living here too. Anything to not see that sadness. Anything to bring a smile to Helen's face. And Arthur kept his promise. Very soon, the girl became part of their cheerful, noisy group. She went with them to the river and the forest, played football and Cossacks and robbers, sat by the evening bonfire on the edge of the village. Helen turned out to be very quiet and thoughtful, and also smart and curious. She knew so much, noticed so much. Arthur openly admired this beautiful girl. Then, at the age of 10, he, of course, didn't yet understand what was happening to him. He couldn't even guess that it was love, and for life. Summer flew by quickly. The school year began. Helen became Arthur's and Peter's classmate. Time passed. School friendship gradually grew into mutual affection. After 9th grade, Arthur went to study at a technical college to become a mechanic. Helen, always an excellent student, enrolled in a medical college. They were already officially dating, going on real dates, travelling to the city to walk around, kissing. No one was surprised. Their pair formed so naturally, as if it couldn't have been any other way. And then Arthur went into the army, and Helen waited for him for 2 whole years. She wrote letters, visited him several times. In the army, Arthur finally matured. Upon returning, he immediately proposed to Helen. She, of course, happily agreed. That's when his grandfather gave the young couple this house. The house where Arthur now faced old age, alone unfortunately. How much he missed Helen, every day, every moment. Sometimes it seemed that she would come out of the kitchen right now, rosy-cheeked, cheerful, smelling of something delicious. She would smile and ask, "How are you?" But that would never happen. Arthur and Helen lived, as they say, soul to soul. They cared for each other. They were happy together. Arthur sometimes felt they understood each other without words. They didn't delay having children. A year after the wedding, they were already nursing their firstborn, William. A couple of years later, a daughter appeared in the family, a charming little laugher, Eleanor, very much like her mother. Arthur worked on the local collective farm, earning well enough to live comfortably. Helen worked part-time as a nurse in the village clinic. The children were a joy. They studied well, helped around the house, and obeyed their parents. Only one thing clouded their happiness. During Helen's second pregnancy, when they were expecting Eleanor, it turned out she had a heart defect. Whether it was congenital or acquired was unclear. It hadn't seemed to bother her before, but giving birth to 2 children in quick succession aggravated the illness. After their daughter was born, Helen began to suffer attacks. She would suddenly turn pale, her lips would turn blue, she would clutch her heart. At such moments, Arthur was gripped by icy fear. He could protect his beloved from anything, from a mad dog, from a bad person, from bad weather, but not from this insidious disease. They dreamed of a large family. They didn't plan to stop at 2 children. But the doctors said Helen couldn't have any more children. It was life-threatening. Helen constantly took medication and periodically stayed in the hospital. Gradually, Arthur got used to it, got used to the illness being under control, and almost stopped fearing for his wife. The children grew up. First, their son left to study in the city. He enrolled in the economics faculty of a prestigious university. On his own, without any help. Arthur and Helen were very proud of him then, but also worried. How would he manage alone, without them? What if he dropped out, fell in with a bad crowd? But William didn't disappoint. He studied excellently and also worked part-time. 2 years later, Eleanor followed in his footsteps. She also left for the city. And Arthur and Helen were left alone in their house. Yes, that was a golden period in their lives. Arthur remembered it with warm sadness. The children were grown, living their own lives, occasionally visiting with news and impressions. Their son and daughter were doing well, even excellently, both in their careers and their personal lives. Arthur and Helen were proud of them and happy for them. And they also enjoyed a quiet, measured life and waited for grandchildren. They went mushroom picking in the forest, fished, celebrated holidays with Peter and his wife Nancy. It was good. Then the grandchildren arrived. First, their son had a daughter, then their daughter had a son. A new era began for Arthur and Helen. The little ones were brought to them for the summer, and they happily looked after their grandchildren. They no longer needed to work. The happy grandparents could devote all their time and attention to these little wonderful human beings. Returning from the forest or fishing with the little ones, Arthur could smell the aroma of delicious baking already in the yard. That was Helen, working hard for her loved ones while they were out. Arthur often thought that this was it, happiness, and thanked fate for such a gift, for Helen, for their children, for their grandchildren. The grandchildren grew older and visited Oakwood less often. It was understandable. They had their own things to do, their own friends. Yesterday's little ones had turned into teenagers. Eleanor and William also didn't spoil their parents with frequent visits. When would they have the time? Work, home, children. Arthur and Helen, of course, missed them, but understood perfectly. Life in the city was a frantic pace. When they visited their children, they would get tired of the rhythm after a couple of days and happily return to their quiet, cosy Oakwood, to their beloved home. And then the illness finally made itself known in full force. Helen got worse. The expensive medications William got from somewhere abroad didn't help. The treatment at the best city medical centre didn't save her. Helen slowly faded, weakening with each passing day. Arthur saw it, understood everything, but could do nothing, absolutely nothing. No, he could do something. He filled his wife's last days with happiness, light, and tenderness. Every morning he gave her bouquets of wildflowers and later bright autumn leaves. He cooked her favourite dishes, talked with her for hours. They remembered the past, including their carefree, happy childhood. Helen smiled, gently, affectionately. Arthur tried to imprint that smile in his memory down to the smallest detail. One evening, Helen became very ill. Arthur called an ambulance. She was taken to the city hospital. Arthur held her hand until the gurney was wheeled into the ward. He never saw his wife alive again. The doctors did everything possible, but a miracle did not happen. Arthur grieved heavily. Everything around him lost meaning. Colours faded. Sounds became muffled, as if coming from through a thick layer of water. The children stayed with their inconsolable father for a little while, and then fluttered back into their own lives. And that was good. Affairs and worries distract from grief, helping to get through difficult days. Peter remained nearby, faithful Peter. He came every day, sat beside him, silently, as always. The friends smoked on the bench by the wall, sometimes exchanging words about the news or the weather. Peter's wife, Nancy, also often dropped by, always bringing something delicious, pies, goulash, dumplings, everything Arthur loved. He valued the care of his close people. He knew they also missed Helen. All four had known each other since childhood, and over the years of living in Oakwood had become almost family. Gradually, life returned to its usual course. Arthur somehow adapted to the new reality, learned to exist without Helen. Although why without Helen? She was always present in his thoughts. He talked to her before bed, shared his sorrows and joys. Mentally, of course. These silent dialogues made the man feel better, as if his soul felt warmer. The children urged their lonely father to move to the city, closer to them. The money Arthur and Helen had saved would be quite enough for a cosy one-bedroom apartment. Life in the city, according to William and Eleanor, would be simpler and more pleasant, and they, their children and grandchildren would be nearby. They could see each other more often. But Arthur couldn't leave his house, where every corner reminded him of happy years, and the landscapes of Oakwood, and the forest with which he had become so close over the years, and his favourite spot by the river, where he went fishing and where he could think so well, and Peter and Nancy. Finally, silent Peter, who had become a brother to Arthur. No, he couldn't leave Oakwood. This was his place. But how could he explain this to his children? They presented logical arguments that were difficult to dispute. Arthur was almost at his gate. His house stood at the edge of the street. Beyond the fence, the snowy highway opened up immediately, along which cars now rarely drove. Further stretched a wide field, and beyond it the forest rose like a wall, the very one Arthur loved to visit. It was already late and very cold. The frost seemed to be getting stronger. Tomorrow, maybe even school would be cancelled. Straight, wide columns of smoke rose from the chimneys into the sky. Life was bustling in these houses. Wives were cooking dinner, children were doing homework, cheerful, warm, bright, cosy. And Arthur? Empty rooms awaited him. Warm, though. Leaving for his visit, he had thoroughly heated the house. It was quite bright, although there were never streetlights on Arthur's street. They mainly lit the central part of Oakwood, but the light of the full moon, which had rolled into the sky, was quite sufficient. Arthur habitually scanned the surroundings, and then he noticed her in the distance, a small, thin, hunched figure of a person. Someone was trudging along the roadside, slowly, barely moving their legs, either from exhaustion or perhaps injured or drunk. In any case, the person clearly needed help. It was dangerous to stay outside in such frost. Arthur hurried towards the lonely figure. For his age, he was in excellent shape and didn't complain about his strength. He could still run very fast. Daily long walks in the fresh air and physical labour, whatever you say, hardened one well. This person was clearly not from Oakwood, because they were walking away from the village, trudging straight along the highway towards the city. Could they really be planning to walk there in such frost? Arthur sped up. The figure was getting closer. Now only dozens of meters remained to the person. Arthur had become near-sighted in his old age, but from this distance he could already make out that a young woman was trudging along the road, sinking into the deep snow. She looked a little older than his granddaughter, maybe 20, maybe less. Thin, somehow frightened, in a long, fashionable but clearly unsuitable down jacket for such weather, and in light boots with a low heel that looked completely ridiculous outside the city. The girl shivered, wrapping herself in a scarf wound several times around her neck. Her hands were bare, her thin fingers completely numb. "Wait!" Arthur called out to the stranger. The girl turned around. She was pretty, with large brown eyes and a scattering of freckles on a slightly upturned nose. Short chestnut curls peeked out from under her knitted hat. The girl flinched in surprise, clearly not expecting to meet anyone on the deserted road. Then fear appeared in her eyes. Arthur understood. If she could, she would have immediately run away. But the stranger was clearly exhausted. She could barely move her legs. "Don't be afraid of me. I won't do anything." Arthur tried to speak as gently as possible. "You need to get warm. The frost is getting stronger. The nearest village is 25 kilometers away. You'll freeze." The girl stopped. She understood that Arthur was right, but she didn't seem to see any other way out. She looked completely desperate. "Did something happen?" Arthur asked sympathetically. He knew that letting her go was tantamount to abandoning someone to certain death. "Yes," the stranger finally said. Her voice trembled. She was clearly holding back tears. Do you need help?" "Yes," the girl nodded again. It seemed she was afraid to say anything more, because then she wouldn't be able to hold back her tears. "All right then. Let's go to my house now. You need to warm up quickly. Your cheeks are completely frozen already. We'll think about how to help you with your trouble there." The girl hesitated. Understandable. Going into a stranger's house, met at night on a deserted highway, was risky, but she had no other choice. And the stranger nodded briefly in agreement. "Excellent. My house. It's very close. Look, there it is by the road," Arthur spoke in a calm, everyday tone, trying to reassure her a little. The stranger walked a little behind Arthur and looked around nervously. Her whole body was tense, ready to run away at the slightest sign of danger. In the yard, old Rusty ran up to Arthur, wagging his tail. The dog had served as the house guard for almost 15 years, loyal, smart, kind. He sniffed the guest and barked a friendly welcome, as if inviting her in. The girl smiled, patted the dog on the head, and the tension that had gripped her eased a little. Arthur was pleased by this change. Maybe the stranger would finally speak and tell him what had happened to her. It was clearly a dark story. The house was warm. Arthur turned on the light, led his guest to the kitchen, and seated her closer to the stove, which was still radiating heat. She needed to warm up. She had spent so much time in the cold. The stranger clearly enjoyed the warmth and comfort of the village house. She took off her hat and scarf. She wasn't in a hurry to unbutton her coat. She hadn't warmed up yet. Arthur put on the kettle. He talked incessantly about something, to avoid an awkward silence. "I'll brew some mint tea now. You'll warm up from the inside and calm your nerves a bit." "Thank you," the girl mumbled. "Thank you for not leaving me there." "Well, how else?" Arthur was surprised. "It happens differently. While I was walking along the highway, several cars drove towards the city. I waved my hands at them, but no one stopped. It must have been scary, a person on a deserted road, kind of suspicious." "Not so much suspicious, but strange, that's for sure," Arthur remarked cautiously. "My name is Chloe," the girl suddenly introduced herself, "and I'm Arthur Sr., or Uncle Arthur, whichever is easier for you." "That's what my grandfather was called." The girl smiled faintly, taking a mug of steaming, fragrant drink from Arthur's hands. "He was the only one who cared about me. It's a shame he died early." There was so much grief, so much longing in these words, that Arthur's heart ached. "I'm sure you're mistaken. You have a mother, a father, don't you? Do you really think you're indifferent even to them?" "Of course," Chloe replied confidently. "They don't have time for me. My father left the family when I was 12. He fell in love, decided to start a new life, and voila, now I have 3 younger sisters, and Mom. I just get in her way. She sometimes dates someone, but she can't bring anyone home, because I'm there. I'm in everyone's way." With these words, Chloe took off her down jacket, and Arthur couldn't help but gasp in surprise. His eyes beheld the girl's rounded belly, stretched by a black sweater. His guest was expecting a child, and judging by the size of her belly, she was quite far along. "Oh, yes, I'm pregnant," Chloe sighed, noticing her host's reaction. "What's so surprising? I'm an adult, in case you were wondering." "Nothing. That's actually very good. Children are happiness. It's just that now I don't understand anything at all. How did you end up on the highway at night, and in such a condition?" "Oh, it's a very long story," the girl sighed. "But we're not exactly in a hurry. Will you tell me what happened?" "Of course, if you'd like." Chloe grew up in a poor family, mother, father, older sister. Her mother worked as a shop assistant, her father at a factory. There was enough money for the bare essentials, cheap clothes from the market, simple food, utility bills. But there were no funds for travel, or for quality cosmetics, or a fancy phone for their daughter. Everyone around Chloe lived like this, but television showed a completely different reality. And the girl dreamed of one day becoming as rich, successful, and beautiful as the heroines in films and TV shows about that colourful world. Chloe's sister Sarah also strived for success. She studied well, tried to win at competitions, dreamed of getting into a medical university and becoming a successful cardiologist. Later, she managed to achieve this plan. But such a path seemed too long and difficult to Chloe. And where was the guarantee that it would work out? Perhaps all her efforts would be in vain. No, this scenario didn't suit young Chloe. The girl inherited thick chestnut hair and large brown eyes from her father, and a magnificent model figure from her mother. She rightly considered her advantageous appearance her ticket to life. For a beautiful young woman, Chloe believed, it wasn't so difficult to find a rich man. And then a completely different life would finally begin. The unfolding prospects were simply breathtaking. "Study harder," responsible Sarah instructed her younger sister. "Depend on a man your whole life. What's good about that? That's definitely not for me." "But it's perfectly for me," Chloe smiled in response. "And what's not for me is slaving over textbooks for hours like you. I'd rather watch videos on how to apply makeup to highlight my best features." "You don't need to highlight anything. You're already a beauty." "I know." After 9th grade, Chloe left the hated school. To get her mother off her back, she enrolled in a culinary college for appearance's sake. The competition there was low, and it wasn't bad to know how to cook well. After all, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Ultimately, the fact that she attended culinary college played a significant role in Chloe's fate. It happened just before graduation. The girl was doing her internship as a cook's assistant in one of the city's most popular restaurants. Sarah helped her get the job. Her older sister had already graduated from university, was working as a doctor in a private clinic, and had built up connections. The owner of the restaurant was Edward, a young man from the Armenian diaspora. Tall, athletic, well-built, always stylishly and expensively dressed, impeccably polite to the staff, witty, cheerful, and very handsome, black eyes, an elegant curve of the lips, noble eyebrows. Edward was twice Chloe's age, but that didn't stop her from falling in love. There he was, the man of her dreams, rich, handsome, successful. With him, she'd go through fire and water. Nothing was scary. But the observant girl immediately noticed a wedding ring on Edward's finger. Yes, he was married. Later, she learned from the restaurant staff that he was a father of many children, raising 3 daughters. For a long time, Chloe only cast loving glances at her idol. Not all of them escaped the notice of the staff. The attentive waitress Olivia noticed the impression Edward made on the young intern. "You're in love, aren't you?" she asked one day. Chloe was flustered and answered honestly, "I think so, yes." "It's not surprising. Edward is handsome, and you, by the way, are quite his type." "How so?" "It's simple. He likes them like that. Thin, young, graceful, and big-eyed." "But Edward is married." "Who has that ever stopped?" Olivia chuckled. "Tell me honestly, aren't you afraid of being a mistress? Because he definitely won't leave his wife and children for you." "I'm not afraid," Chloe replied. At that moment she didn't care, as long as she was near Edward. "Well then, I can arrange a date for you." "Edward, he actually asked me to talk to you, to test the waters. He likes you too." Chloe couldn't believe it. Her head spun. Edward, this prince, this king, her idol. Had he really noticed her and even asked Olivia to talk to her? Wow. Of course, Chloe happily agreed to the date. The first meeting took place in a huge country mansion. Everything was mysterious and romantic. Edward sent a car for Chloe. The driver took her out of the city to the mansion. Luxury. Everything was luxurious. The girl felt as if she had stepped into a film about the beautiful life, one of those she loved so much. Edward waited for Chloe in a gazebo decorated with lanterns and flowers, next to the pool. The stars shone brightly in the sky, and he looked at Chloe with admiration, interest, and smiled. All of this made her head spin. Was this real or a dream? The doubts vanished when Edward approached and gallantly took her hand. The warmth of his palm was real. That evening, so unusual, romantic and magical, Chloe completely lost her head. Edward turned out to be even more perfect than he seemed from afar. Intelligent, sensitive, perceptive. In some incredible way, he guessed all of Chloe's desires and fulfilled them almost instantly, and the way he looked at her, that gaze made her feel exquisite, unique. Next to Edward, Chloe felt like a queen. Edward was generous with gifts, expensive jewelry, designer cosmetics, elite perfume. Chloe's dreams came true. She bought clothes in boutiques, these things. They were strikingly different from everything she had worn before. In dresses and jeans from famous couturiers, Chloe felt luxurious, irresistible, stunning. The admiration in the eyes of others, and most importantly, in Edward's dark eyes, further convinced her of her own irresistibility. Edward, he was so tender with her. A powerful, rich man treated Chloe like a fragile flower or a crystal vase. It was so pleasant to be near him, to inhale his scent, to feel the warmth of his hands, to hear his low voice with a slight rasp, to see his smile, kind, charming, warm. They usually met at that same mansion. As Chloe understood, it was one of Edward's country houses for recreation. There were many spacious, stylishly furnished rooms, a large gym, a mini cinema, and 2 pools. The area around the indoor pool imitated a beach. White sand, palm trees, sun loungers. Edward and Chloe often spent time here. While the girl swam, Edward, lounging on a sun lounger, watched her. He said he admired her graceful movements and sculpted figure. Chloe was pleased to hear this. During these meetings, which happened regularly, once a week, sometimes twice, there was no one in the house, not even staff. Chloe enjoyed the closeness of her beloved and the surrounding luxury without a second thought for anyone. Of course, Chloe understood perfectly well that she was just a mistress. Edward had emphasized many times how important his family was to him. And at the same time, he looked at her like that. Her presence made him happy. Chloe knew this for sure. Everything else was not important for now. "You probably judge me," Chloe asked Arthur, lowering her gaze. "It just sounds like that. But you see, I knew Edward was married, and I still agreed to this relationship, and with joy." "Not at all, honestly," Arthur replied. "You're just a young girl, and he's an adult, a married man, the owner of a large business. He is the one to blame, as a man, as an older person." "Perhaps you're right, but back then I didn't blame Edward for anything. On the contrary, I felt sorry for him. I saw that he loved me, at least that's how it seemed to me, but I understood that Edward couldn't leave his wife and children. His relatives wouldn't understand him. Edward said many times how important the opinion of elders and relatives is in their culture. They would never forgive him for such an act. And that's why I felt sorry for him, and loved him very, very much." One day, Edward told everyone he was going on a business trip. In reality, he decided to arrange a holiday for himself and his young mistress. They flew to Thailand. They went from the cold February straight into a hot, sunny summer. Winter was ending and had become tiresome. Snow, frost, slush. And here, just a few hours by plane, and Chloe and her beloved were in a summer fairy tale. Luxurious beaches, mesmerizing views, warm turquoise water. Chloe and Edward could finally appear together openly, in restaurants, at discos, on the streets of the resort town. They looked magnificent. Chloe knew it. Handsome, masculine Edward and she, fragile, happy, tanned. Edward openly hugged her waist, held her hand, kissed her. For the first time, they weren't hiding. These were indescribable feelings. Chloe had never felt so happy. In Edward's strong, reliable embrace, she forgot about everything, even about the fact that he was married and they would soon return home, where she would again have to be content with rare meetings and feel like just a mistress. Deep down, the girl harboured a hope. The hope that Edward would sooner or later leave his wife for her. It sometimes happens. Why couldn't a miracle happen to them? Only something had to happen that would help Edward decide on a desperate step. There in Thailand, the man once confided in Chloe. They were returning from the beach. It was late at night. Edward and Chloe loved swimming in the dark, when there were few people on the beaches, and often returned to the hotel after midnight. And so now they were walking along the water's edge. Water dripped from Chloe's long, wavy hair. She hadn't had time to dry it with a towel. To be precise, she just didn't. Edward had once confessed that he adored looking at her wet hair. That's how Chloe reminded him of a beautiful mermaid, so the girl tried for his sake. The moon shone brightly in the sky. It was unusual here, too large, naturally yellow, as if painted. A fantastic sight. Muffled music came from somewhere near the pier. Probably a disco had started in the bar. "What are you dreaming about?" Edward asked thoughtfully. Chloe pondered. Should she tell the truth? Confess that she only dreamed of falling asleep and waking up in his arms, cooking him breakfast, seeing him off to work, ironing his shirts? Wouldn't that sound too boring? What if Edward thought she was clingy? No, Chloe couldn't allow that. "I dream of travelling a lot, to travel all over Europe, visit exotic countries, see with my own eyes things I only heard about before." "A wonderful wish," Edward approved. "I'll help you make it happen. I like the idea myself." "And you? What do you dream about?" Chloe asked. His answer stunned her. "I dream of a son," Edward confessed. "More than anything in the world, I want to have a son. But with my wife, we only have girls. I adore them. My daughters are my life. I'm proud of them. I love them. But I continue to dream of an heir." "I never would have thought. Why?" Edward smiled. "I thought you dreamed of opening a new chain of restaurants, starting a business, building an empire." "Oh yes, many people think so. No one imagines that more than anything in the world I dream of a son, a continuation of my lineage. I've already thought of a name for him. Sometimes I look at toys in the boys' sections, and then I go to the pink shelves with dolls to make my daughters happy." "You sound like a wonderful father," Chloe sighed, and thought of her own father. He never bought her or her sister dolls. What about dolls? Her indifferent father couldn't even say what grade his daughter was in or when their birthdays were. Chloe thought a lot about that conversation on the beach afterwards, and gradually a decision formed in her mind. A bold one, perhaps reckless. She would fulfill the dream of the man she loved. She would bear him a son, as handsome and intelligent as Edward himself. At first, the girl was frightened by her thoughts. Edward had said directly that he wasn't going to leave his wife and children. Would he be happy about the news of a child on the side? This was very serious, but one day, Chloe saw how tenderly Edward treated a little boy, the child of visitors to his restaurant. The little one was about 3 or 4 years old. He was being fussy in his high chair. Perhaps he was bored. He wanted to run, have fun, make noise. Edward, who had popped into the restaurant for a minute, noticed the scene. He went up to the child, shook his hand like an adult, started a conversation, and the little one immediately calmed down, as if he had grown up before his eyes. "You are happy parents," he said to the visitors. "You are raising a wonderful son, a real man." "Indeed." the boy's mother scoffed skeptically. Her whole demeanor suggested she didn't consider herself a happy parent. But Chloe, who had already finished her internship and was working as a waitress, had managed to notice everything. Edward's tender gaze at the child, his warm smile. It seemed he really did dream of a son very much. This episode helped Chloe make up her mind. She realized it was time to move from planning to action. The girl simply stopped taking her pills, and also she scoured the internet looking for a way to conceive specifically a boy. These methods seemed too unreliable. Chloe needed guarantees, and so she turned to Sarah, her older sister, who had graduated from medical academy and understood such matters. "You have strange interests," Sarah was surprised to hear the question. "Nothing strange. We have a waitress. Her name is Olivia. She and her husband are planning their second child. The eldest is a daughter. Now they want a son. Is there any way to arrange this?" "Well, there is one option," Sarah replied. "True, it's not particularly reliable, but it increases the chances of conceiving a child of the desired sex. Although, I repeat, it's a very complex process. And by the way, a lot depends on the man's physiology. But go ahead. I'll write down a calculation scheme for your Olivia for the necessary days. Let them try with her husband. You never know." And Chloe, of course, used this scheme. It worked immediately, on the first try. 2 weeks after the romantic evening, Chloe realized she was expecting a child. The discovery both delighted and frightened her, but there was no turning back. The girl said nothing to Edward. She wanted to find out the baby's sex herself first, and then surprise him. Circumstances also worked out well. The man had flown to Armenia with his family for several months. Chloe missed her beloved, and at the same time enjoyed her new condition. It was amazing to realize that a child was living inside her. Not just a child, their baby, hers and Edward's. They would have a son. Chloe had almost no doubt that she was carrying a boy. She felt it. Chloe didn't tell her relatives about the pregnancy. Anyway, no one would have been interested. Her mother lived her own life. Her father had disappeared completely. Sarah had long been renting an apartment in the city centre, closer to work. The sisters didn't communicate much. At the appointed time, Chloe went for an ultrasound. With a pounding heart, she waited for the specialist's verdict. "You're having a boy," said the strict woman in glasses, moving the sensor over her stomach, which was just beginning to round. "A healthy, strong boy. Congratulations." Chloe flew home on wings. That very day, Sarah came to visit and immediately understood everything. Her sister always had a sharp eye. "Are you pregnant?" she asked quietly when their mother went into the kitchen. "Yes," Chloe nodded, not even trying to hide her smile. "I'm having a son soon." "Who is the father?" "The best man in the world." "And where is he? Why aren't you with him yet? How are you planning to raise the child?" "Dad," Chloe said dreamily, "he's just not in the country right now, and it's not ideal to give such news over the phone. I'll wait for him to come back, and everything will be decided. Just don't tell Mom yet, or she'll drive me crazy." "As you wish," Sarah shrugged. "If you need help, ask. I can't promise much, but I'll help with what I can." "Thank you very much." Her mother still managed to wear out her pregnant daughter's nerves. When her belly became impossible to hide, she noticed everything. How her mother screamed at Chloe then, called her names, threatened her with a hard life. Then she softened, started prying about the baby's father. Chloe told the truth, but she didn't believe a single word. She decided that Chloe had gotten pregnant by some good-for-nothing and was now making up stories. Her mother often sighed about her difficult fate, complaining that soon her ungrateful daughter would burden her with a freeloader. The girl clenched her teeth to avoid useless arguments and waited for her beloved to return. The day Edward flew back from Armenia was snowy and cold. January was ending, a long February lay ahead, and after that, in March, in the first days of spring, a wonderful baby, Edward's long-awaited son, would be born. Edward himself called Chloe, said he missed her very much and dreamed of meeting. As usual, he sent a car for her, which brought Chloe to the familiar country house. The man opened the door himself, smiling, warmly and kindly. Chloe simply adored his smile. But very soon that self-charming smile slid off his face. Edward saw Chloe's belly, which could no longer be hidden. What is this?" he asked with something akin to disgust. "Edward, I didn't want to tell you over the phone. I dreamed of telling you in person. We're having a son soon. A son, Edward, can you imagine? Your dream will come true." The man sank into a chair, looking tired. It was as if he had aged in an instant. From him, it was as if an icy coldness emanated. This was so unusual that Chloe was flustered and frightened. She understood that Edward would be surprised, but he looked as if he had just learned about some annoying problem. And what about his talk of a son? He had dreamed so much. "You're not happy?" Chloe ventured. Edward raised his eyes to her. They looked very tired. "Go home," the man said calmly. "Go. I need to think things over. I'll tell you later what to do." Edward called a taxi himself. In the house, Chloe had held it together, but in the car she let the tears flow. A loving person wouldn't have acted like that. They hadn't seen each other for several months, and he had sent her away, kicked her out. Edward didn't love her. Before, Chloe had felt like a beautiful princess next to him. Now he treated her like a useless object. There wasn't a drop of love or joy in his eyes, only irritation and anger. How could this be? Had he been pretending? Had he just been using her beauty and youth? Chloe didn't want to go home. Her mother would be there with complaints. By the way, her parent had been right. It seemed Chloe would have to raise the baby alone. The child. Thoughts of him restored Chloe's presence of mind. Soon her son would be born, her own beloved person. He needed a strong, sensible mother, so Chloe would be that. Thinking of her little boy, the girl smiled through her tears. Life no longer seemed hopeless. So what if Edward wouldn't be there? But Chloe would soon be a mother. Even the anticipation of meeting her little one was happiness. And when she held him in her arms, then she would be able to handle anything. Chloe asked the driver to take her to Sarah's. She could tell Sarah everything, her sister. She was so smart, so kind. Of course she would help, and Sarah did help. She listened, she sympathized. Then she went into the living room and pulled out the sofa bed. "This will be your bed," she explained. "Live with me for now. Mum really won't leave you alone, and you can't be stressed right now." For a while, Chloe felt safe. It was calm and easy. Sarah supported her sister in every way, buying vitamins and healthy food. "I want my nephew to be born healthy," her older sister smiled. This made Chloe feel warm inside. It was nice that someone else, besides herself, was waiting for the baby and caring. And then one day Edward reappeared. He didn't send a car, he came himself. The girl was returning from the shop. The man was waiting for her in his car near the entrance. "Hello?" He opened the driver's door. Edward was smiling again, but now Chloe didn't believe that smile. "Hello?" the girl greeted him cautiously. "Get in, we need to talk." Chloe settled in next to him, still the man she loved. She felt his scent again and saw his black, beautiful eyes up close. That familiar, pleasant chill ran through her stomach, a habitual sensation. "How are you?" the man asked. "Everything all right? How are you feeling? How's the baby?" He was asking about her condition. Did he actually care? Chloe didn't know how to react. Hope stirred in her soul. Maybe that day the news had just thrown him off balance, and now he had thought everything over, realized he was wrong, and was ready to make amends. "Everything is fine, both with me and with my son." "That's wonderful. I have a question. You don't think you can raise him yourself, alone?" "If that's how it turned out, then I can," Chloe stated confidently. "Oh, come on," Edward chuckled. "You have no education and no job either. You won't be able to go back to work for 3 years. And even then, people aren't exactly eager to hire a mother with a small child. Children get sick, mothers take sick leave. Who needs that?" Chloe still couldn't understand what he was getting at, and he continued. "You practically have no father. Your mother is no help. She lives poorly, and your relationship isn't the most trusting. I know all this. All your hope is on your sister, but she won't babysit you forever. And it's unfair to burden a young woman with your problems. She needs to build her own life." Chloe was hurt by these words. The most terrible thing was that they were all the pure truth. "Why are you telling me all this?" the girl asked, her voice trembling with tears. "I'm just outlining your situation, to offer a way out, a real way out." And Edward finally revealed his plan, monstrous and inhuman. He offered me to give the child to him," the girl said quietly, looking directly into Arthur's eyes. It was clearly difficult for Chloe to tell the story. Arthur patted her shoulder encouragingly. "Well, imagine that, what a scoundrel this Edward is, poor girl." Edward said he really dreamed of a son. With his wife, they had 3 girls. It turned out he had 2 more illegitimate daughters. He had already decided that it was something in his blood or genes. And then suddenly Chloe announces she's expecting a son. At first, upon learning of his mistress's pregnancy, the man was angry. It was extra trouble. But then he thought it over and felt joy. Finally, he would have a son. Edward dreamed of a brilliant future for his heir. He had so many plans. And if the son grew up with a single mother, he was unlikely to become a worthy man. No, Edward couldn't allow that. "I'll take him from you. I'll take him into my family. I've already talked to my wife. She's now pretending to be pregnant. We'll tell everyone that he's ours, mine, and my wife's." "No!" Chloe shook her head in horror and placed her hand on her belly as if protecting the baby. "No, this will be better for everyone," Edward continued. "I'll help you with a job, with an apartment. You'll live a free life, find a rich husband. I know that's what you dream of. With a child in your arms, you're unlikely to achieve that. The boy will grow up in decent conditions. I will give him everything. You won't be able to provide even a small fraction of what I will give him." Edward's gaze was almost pleading. At that moment, Chloe felt her power over this strong man. Perhaps because of this, she mistakenly thought she could decide something, make a choice. "No," the girl repeated. She couldn't part with her little one. Chloe had waited for him so much, thought about him so much. She already loved her son, with all her soul, with all her heart. And to give him to Edward? No way, never. "You should still think about it," Edward requested. "I'll call you later." "There's nothing to think about." "No," Chloe said and got out of the car. She blocked Edward's number so she wouldn't get upset. At home, Chloe told Sarah everything. Her sister's face took on a worried expression. "This is bad, very bad," she said. "People like Edward are used to getting what they want. You need to be on your guard." Her sister was right. Edward didn't back down. About a week after the conversation in the car, Chloe was almost kidnapped. They tried to drag her into a van with dirty license plates right on the street. The girl was so scared. She couldn't resist the strength of the man pulling her towards the open door. A coincidence saved her. A police car appeared at the beginning of the street. The would-be kidnapper pushed Chloe away, jumped into the van, and sped off. She sat down right in a snowdrift because her legs had given out. Learning what had happened, Sarah became seriously alarmed. "He won't stop," her sister shook her head. Just then, the phone rang. Someone was calling Sarah's phone. She answered and handed the receiver to Chloe. "Strange, but it's for you." "Well, hello." Edward's voice sounded in the receiver, alien, cold, harsh. Could this really be the man who had recently called her beautiful, a queen, a miracle? "Please, stop harassing me," Chloe begged. "I beg you, leave me alone." "I will, as soon as I get my son. You can be free. A car will come for you today. Be ready by 8 in the evening. A man will take you to a private clinic. You'll give birth there. The child will be taken, and you'll be sent home. With compensation, of course." Chloe couldn't believe this was happening in reality. Edward turned out not to be a fairy tale prince, but an evil, cruel man. And now it seemed there was no escaping him. He had money, connections, his own people. How could she oppose him, a man who was used to being able to buy anything? And now he was offering money for her little one. It was beyond comprehension. Well, just think, what a man! Arthur couldn't help but exclaim, emotions overwhelming him. "It's my own fault," Chloe lowered her eyes. "I wanted a beautiful life, and I got myself into this mess." "You shouldn't blame yourself," Arthur tried to make his voice softer. "You were just a young, inexperienced girl, and you fell in love with that scoundrel. You were just unlucky." Chloe took a deep breath and continued. "Sarah called me a taxi at 6 in the evening, 2 hours before the time Edward had set. She booked a room in a hotel in the neighbouring town. She said I couldn't give up here if I wanted to protect the child." Sarah, as always, had a clear plan. The older sister said Chloe needed to hold out until the birth. There was a little over a month left. And then it was important to manage to register the baby as her own. Once Chloe was officially recognized as the mother and the child was hers, Edward wouldn't be able to do anything. Only there were many difficulties in this plan. Firstly, hiding from someone like Edward, even for a few weeks, was problematic. A hotel wasn't a reliable place. To check in, you needed a passport. Chloe's details would surely be recorded. But there was no other way out, and the sisters didn't have acquaintances willing to shelter Chloe for a few weeks. Secondly, the birth itself. As soon as Chloe went to the maternity hospital, Edward would immediately find out. He would surely be monitoring such clinics because he knew Chloe would sooner or later have to seek help. "But Sarah will help me with that," Chloe smiled. "She came up with a solution. She has an acquaintance, a midwife, who will deliver my baby. This woman has a whole room set up in her apartment, so Edward won't find out anything." So the sisters' plan took shape. Chloe would go to the neighbouring town and live in a hotel. When the time came, Sarah would come for her, and they would go to that midwife. Then Chloe would have to stay in the hotel for a while longer, because registering the baby's documents wasn't an instantaneous process. Well, and after she had the birth certificate in hand, she could safely return. Only nothing worked out. Chloe shook her head. Sarah called a taxi. The driver took me to another town, but on the way, it turned out we were being followed. A black SUV with tinted windows relentlessly followed the taxi. The driver noticed. He twisted and turned, trying to shake them off, but the car didn't fall behind. And then the man became worried. "Did you do something?" he asked. "Why are we being followed?" "No, I didn't do anything, honestly," Chloe replied. "I don't like this. I don't need problems." The taxi drove onto the country highway, a deserted, snow-covered road. The pursuit continued. "This won't do," the nervous taxi driver said. He pressed the gas pedal to the floor and sped forward at high speed. Having pulled away from the SUV, the driver braked and opened the door. "Get out. You've paid for the ride. I won't take the money, although I drove you well. Deal with your problems yourself." "But where will I go?" Chloe was horrified. A deserted road, freezing cold, darkness, and that scary SUV will appear any minute. "I have no idea. Wait for the car that's following us. They're looking for you, so they definitely won't leave you on the road. They won't drive past, and I have to go." Saying this, the driver slammed the door shut and sped off. Almost at the same time, headlights appeared in the distance. It was probably the SUV catching up to the taxi. Chloe barely managed to hide behind a large snowdrift. The black, terrifying car sped past. The taxi driver's calculation didn't pay off. They continued to pursue him, thinking the passenger was still in the car. "Well, that's basically it," Chloe sighed. "I ended up alone on that highway, so I walked back, towards the city. I wasn't going to freeze. And then you found me. That's how it happened." "It's a puzzling story," Arthur said slowly. "But what are we going to do with you now? How can I help?" Chloe shrugged. "Here's what," Arthur declared decisively. "You need to rest now. Lie down right here, in the kitchen, near the stove, on this sofa. I'll bring a pillow and a blanket now." "Really?" Chloe's eyes lit up with joy. It was clear she was very tired and cold. She had been through such stress. The thought of leaving the warm, cozy house made her panic. "Of course, really. How else? We'll think about how to help tomorrow. A new day brings new counsel." "Thank you," the girl exclaimed. "You're welcome," Arthur replied with a smile. "And listen, don't be afraid of anything here. They definitely won't look for you here." Chloe fell asleep instantly. Understandable. She had been through so much. Arthur carefully closed the kitchen door, put on his padded jacket, slipped his feet into his felt boots, and went out onto the porch to smoke. Yes, the girl's situation was difficult. He had to help. Arthur looked at the bright stars and tried to figure out how to save Chloe. The difficulty was that he couldn't go to the police. It seemed this Edward had everything covered there. Gradually, a good plan formed in Arthur's head. In the morning, Arthur got up early to prepare breakfast. He himself was used to coffee and a sandwich, but today he had a guest, and a pregnant one at that. She needed proper nutrition, so he made scrambled eggs with chicken and tomatoes. Chloe ravenously attacked the breakfast and devoured everything in an instant. "Thank you. It was incredibly delicious." She sincerely thanked him. "You're doing so much for me." "I thought about your situation yesterday," Arthur began the serious conversation. "And I decided, why go to a hotel where they might find you? Stay with me. They won't look for you here. I'll tell the villagers you're my niece. They know her, our Clara. She used to visit us when she was a teenager, and you look very much like her, so no questions will arise." "But I can't. I feel bad imposing on you like this." "Stop with that nonsense," Arthur interrupted. "It's no trouble at all, and helping someone in such a situation is the right thing to do. So live here as long as you need, and you can stay with the baby here too until you get the documents sorted out." "Thank you." Chloe threw her arms around the embarrassed Arthur's neck. "Clara, if anyone asks, your name is Clara," the elderly man reminded her with a smile. Yes, I'll remember. And can I call Sarah from your phone? I'm afraid my number is tapped. I'll tell her how I am. She's worried. Of course. Arthur handed her his mobile phone. And a new kind of life began in the small village house. Chloe slept a lot at first. Arthur understood that her body was fighting stress and tried not to disturb her. He told the neighbours that his niece Clara had come to visit. She had recently married, was expecting a child, and her husband was finishing renovations. They had sent Clara to her uncle in the village for fresh air, so she wouldn't breathe paint fumes. The story didn't raise any questions from anyone. Only Peter clearly suspected something, but kept his suspicions to himself. Chloe spoke little, sometimes talking about her life before everything happened. From everything she said, it seemed she had been an unwanted child. Only Sarah, her older sister, and her grandfather Arthur, who died early, had cared for her. The girl sometimes called Sarah from Arthur's phone, talking in hushed tones. Arthur tried to go into the back rooms so as not to embarrass his guest. In gratitude, Chloe tried to help with the housework. She washed dishes, dusted, and one day she decided to bake a pie. But it didn't turn out well. The dough was raw inside, burnt outside, and the filling was too salty. "Oh dear, I've ruined the ingredients," Chloe lamented. "It's nothing serious. You're still young," Arthur chuckled. But he thought to himself that a culinary college graduate should know how to bake something like that. But maybe Chloe hadn't recovered from what she had been through. After all, she had gone through terrible things. And it wasn't over yet. The most crucial and dangerous part of the plan was ahead. Arthur felt sorry for the young girl who had gotten into such a mess through inexperience. He understood that Chloe was simply looking for love and protection, everything she hadn't seen from her indifferent and cold parents. That's why she fell in love with this Edward, who was twice her age. Chloe. She was almost a child, just a little older than his granddaughter. Only Alice was loved and pampered, and this girl was practically abandoned. It was good that she had a reliable sister. It was a pity that Sarah couldn't come here. Her visit would cheer Chloe up. But Edward's people might be watching Sarah, which is why the sisters communicated at a distance. Arthur sometimes wondered what would have happened to Chloe if he hadn't met her that night. She would surely have frozen on the way to the city, or Edward would have caught up with her. In any case, the girl was very lucky that night. Sometimes in the evenings, Chloe would get cramps in her stomach. She would hug it with her hands and listen, counting something. Arthur understood. The hour of birth was approaching. Sometimes he became scared. What if everything started right here, at his place? What should he do? He could call the neighbour, old Martha, who had once worked as an orderly in a maternity hospital. But when was that? Arthur became more anxious each day. One evening, while heartily eating the dinner Arthur had prepared, Chloe announced the news. "It's time," she said. "What?" Arthur didn't understand. "It's time to go to the city, to that midwife. She's been warned and is waiting. The baby wants to come into the world. The time is near, and he's kicking so much it's like he's cramped." "Well, well," Arthur scratched the back of his head. "So a new person will appear soon. I've lived so many years, and it's still a miracle and a mystery." "I can't believe it either," Chloe admitted. "And honestly, I'm very scared of giving birth. But Sarah says I'm like someone in a submarine. There's nowhere to go." "Okay, how will you get there?" "Sarah will call a taxi. I'll leave the day after tomorrow evening. Maybe for a day, maybe for a couple of days. Then I'll need to wait somewhere with the baby while the documents are being processed." Of course," Arthur understood her hesitation. "We agreed you'll come back here with the child. But we need to get ready, right? a crib, a stroller, clothes, formula, diapers. Sarah has prepared everything. I'll come back with the child and the things, Chloe smiled. Everything will be fine. You're lucky with your sister, Arthur approved. She's a good one. You can see that right away. That's true, Chloe agreed. I can't imagine what I'd do without her, and without you too. That evening, Arthur went to visit Peter and Nancy. The occasion was a happy one. Sam, their youngest son, had received a scientific degree. The young man had worked hard towards his goal. The old friends sat up late, reminiscing about their youth, funny stories. As always, they talked about Helen. Peter and Nancy also missed her very much. Closer to midnight, Arthur headed home. He opened the door quietly so as not to wake Chloe. She was surely asleep by now. But as soon as he entered the hallway, Arthur heard the girl's voice. She was speaking loudly and clearly, thinking she was alone. Tomorrow I'll come for the child. Will he be with you already? No, I need to know for sure. We need to act carefully here. Yes, he agrees. I'll live with the baby here for a while. I'll have to take care of him, it's not easy. So I want to get not 30, but 50%. You're taking a bigger risk, but I'm not on vacation either. I still have to deal with a noisy little brat, don't forget. Arthur was stunned by what he heard. The first thing that grated on his ears was noisy little brat. Chloe had spoken of her son with such tenderness, and then suddenly this. It's a dangerous scheme, but we've calculated everything. The plan shouldn't fail. Everything is thought out to the smallest detail. Chloe continued to say strange, incomprehensible things. What scheme? What plan? What risk? Arthur began to guess that Chloe was not who she claimed to be. He became all ears. He needed to find out as much as possible to understand how to act. Let's go over the details again, Chloe continued. You, posing as an orderly, sneak into the maternity ward and take the baby. Inject him with a sedative so he doesn't cry. Bring him to your place. I'll be waiting there. I'll take the little one, come back here, and pretend to be an overjoyed, inexperienced mother. Meanwhile, you contact the family and demand money. As soon as we get the money, we leave the boy at the train station and we fly to Europe. With that kind of cash, no one will find us. Arthur was dumbfounded. Chloe, without realizing it, had revealed her plan. Some things remained unclear, but he grasped the essence. Chloe was only pretending to be pregnant. She was planning with someone to take someone else's baby from the maternity ward for money. And they were using his house, Arthur's house, as a hideout. In the old village house, they wouldn't look for Chloe with a child. Perhaps the criminals had heard from someone about the lonely, kind widower and invented such a story. They presented Chloe as a victim, hiding from an evil lover who wanted to take her child. In reality, they were the ones planning to take the newborn. Arthur stood by the door, listening to Chloe's unusually harsh, cold voice, and frantically thought about what to do. He had to turn around, slip out of the house, and go back to Peter's. Together they would find a way out. And now he had to run before Chloe noticed he had been eavesdropping. Otherwise, everything would be lost. Arthur, without turning around, backed out the door. Chloe didn't notice anything. He ran as fast as he could to his old friend's house. Peter and Nancy listened to him attentively. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" Peter was surprised. "I thought that girl didn't look much like your Clara. I was afraid you'd accidentally let something slip. And she said she was in danger." "Well, imagine that," Nancy said slowly. "You've sheltered a criminal." "She's a magnificent actress," Arthur sighed. "If I hadn't accidentally overheard that conversation, I would never have guessed." "We need to save the child," Peter declared. "The one they plan to take. Newborns are so fragile. Who knows what that girl might do to him, even unintentionally. The baby shouldn't fall into such hands." "I know, but how do we save him?" Arthur looked at his friends. "I don't know what to do. Which maternity hospital is the child in? Who is Chloe's accomplice? We don't know anything. We don't even know the city." "We need to go to Officer Miller," Nancy exclaimed, a sudden thought striking her. Officer Miller was the local precinct officer, honest, brave, decisive, with a strong sense of justice. He would definitely advise them. They didn't wait for morning. They went to the station at night. Officer Miller was on duty. Peter knew. He had met him the day before. They had talked, and the officer had said he was working the night shift. Officer Miller was very surprised to see the procession at his doorstep. "What brings you here? Did something happen?" "Something happened," Peter replied. Arthur stepped forward and began his long story. The officer didn't interrupt, listened attentively, and asked questions. "It's some kind of modern story," he said when Arthur finished. "I'll contact my colleagues in the city, get some advice, and you go home so as not to arouse suspicion. You, Arthur, act as usual, and in the morning it's better to come up with an excuse and go to Peter's, stay there for a while. If I understand correctly, we're talking about a serious crime." The next morning, Arthur made breakfast for himself and Chloe as usual. The girl chirped cheerfully, talking about a dream. Arthur tried to smile so as not to arouse suspicion. But it was difficult. Chloe stroked her fake belly, talked to a non-existent child. A liar. How utterly false, insincere, unpleasant she was, like a nasty toad. And how had Arthur not noticed it before? "I'm going to Peter's," he told Chloe. "For the whole day I need to fix the barn roof. You don't get bored here. Lunch is in the fridge. I'll be back for dinner." "Of course," Chloe smiled radiantly. "And I'll get ready, because Sarah's taxi is coming tomorrow. I can't believe I'll meet my son in a couple of days. It's exciting." Arthur forced a smile and hurried to Peter's. He couldn't stay under the same roof with that person any longer. Arthur spent the whole day at Peter and Nancy's. They discussed what was happening, made assumptions. It was easier to get through the strange story with old friends. Late in the evening, Officer Miller appeared at Peter's house, tired but cheerful, in high spirits. "Well, old bandits, the crime is solved. We caught those criminals, and we stumbled upon someone else along the way." Nancy gestured for the men to sit at the round table. When everyone was seated, Officer Miller told the incredible story. Chloe turned out not to be Chloe at all. The girl's real name was Victoria. Of everything she told Arthur, only her love for money was true. Victoria had dreamed of getting rich since childhood, but she chose the wrong path. In her teenage years, she engaged in petty theft in supermarkets, got caught, but there was no serious punishment. Then a bigger case, she participated in car theft. She was lucky. The guy, her accomplice, took all the blame. Apparently, he had feelings for her. Victoria tried working as a saleswoman at a reception desk. But she soon realized that she wouldn't get rich quickly through honest means. One day in a nightclub, she accidentally met another adventurer. Paula was older and more experienced. She proposed the scheme. Paula worked as an orderly in the city's best maternity hospital. It had a paid ward for important people. It resembled an expensive resort. In this ward, the wife of a major businessman, a well-known figure, was staying for observation. Legends circulated about his wealth. Paula knew that the child his wife was carrying was long awaited. The couple had struggled to conceive for a long time. The pregnancy was problematic. The expectant mother had to be hospitalized frequently. The entire staff knew this family's story, and Paula did too. The insidious plan had been brewing for a long time. It was simple. Take the baby from the nursery, nothing complicated for an employee, and then the distraught parents would pay any money. Only they needed an accomplice, a loyal person willing to take risks. And Victoria, the new acquaintance, was suitable. Together they planned the details. And they found out about Arthur, the widower from the distant village, accidentally from Alice, his granddaughter, Officer Miller recounted. She was telling her friends about her grandfather in a cafe, saying how much he missed her grandmother, describing his kindness. And Paula and Victoria, sitting at a nearby table, overheard. Such an incredible coincidence. First, they scouted the situation, made sure that there really was a lonely widower in the old house. Then they proceeded with the plan. They staged the scene with the trudging pregnant girl. Officer Miller shook his head. And you fell for it. Then she fed you more lies. A good actress. You didn't suspect anything. Not even a thought, Arthur agreed. I felt sorry for her. She looked unhappy. And we picked up that girl from you, Officer Miller continued. The other day, supposedly for a document check, saying an unknown girl had appeared, living there for a month. According to witnesses, the madam's belly turned out to be fake. We ran her documents through the database, and it turned out she was wanted for property damage. She punctured tires. She had been repeatedly involved in minor incidents. And then we got to the story with the child. The girl was weak. She immediately gave up her friend. And we caught her red-handed at the maternity hospital when she was carrying the baby out the gate. That's where we arrested her. That's the story. Just like in a movie, Nancy exclaimed, clapping her hands. Peter and Arthur sat in silence. It wasn't easy, that's for sure. But no time for tea. I have to go to the station. I just stopped by for a minute to inform you. I'm up to my neck in work. I have to write a report. By the way, Arthur, I'll officially summon you tomorrow. I need your testimony. All right, the elderly man nodded. He needed time to process it. It was unbelievable. He had become so attached to Chloe, so invested in her story. He felt sorry for the poor, misguided girl who had been manipulated by an older lover. And now it turned out there was no Edward? She told such a plausible story about an older lover, described it in such detail. Edward, Officer Miller clarified, is a real person. She really did try to charm him, and it worked. A young, beautiful girl. The cunning lady managed to take many photos and videos, and then extorted money from Edward. He paid. He didn't want his wife, relatives, and partners to find out everything. Such a reputation was unnecessary. In the end, he went to the police. He had a lot of problems because of her. What a girl, Nancy was amazed. A devil in a skirt. By the way, the businessman whose baby they wanted to take is very grateful to you, Arthur. He says he will definitely contact you and shake your hand personally. And not just shake it, I think he'll come with a gift. Arthur was embarrassed. What had he done? He had accidentally overheard and reported it. The police had done the work. If anyone deserved a reward, it was them. Officer Miller left. Nancy went to the kitchen, started rattling pots and pans, calming sounds. Peter and Arthur remained at the table. Yes, Peter said. Well, well. Now, I suppose you won't trust anyone at all? Why? Arthur was surprised. If such a situation happened again, I would do the same. It's better to get burned than to leave a person in trouble. You are an amazing person, Peter said slowly. Well, how about fishing tomorrow morning? That's a good idea, Arthur approved.